Hi, welcome to PHI and PPE, uh, podcast by Copper Penny Consulting. I'm Amy Wood,
And I'm Deanna Otts-Whitfield.
and today we are going to be talking about training new hires and employee errors. So
Hmm.
let's get started. Which one do
Yes.
you want to do first?
Ooh, let's talk about those training new hires.
Oh, yay. We both have this in both of our respective fields. I know on my side with HIPAA and cybersecurity in particular, the training is very generalized and a few examples are given, but in general, we're not seeing detailed enough information for team members to actually do what they're supposed to do. And a question I get asked is, well, how often do we have to train people for HIPAA? And the answer is the law says periodically. So, what does that actually mean? Periodically can mean any number of days or years or months or whatever. But then we go and look at the corrective action plans of people that have been fined or gotten in trouble. And I've dealt with a lot of them with data breaches over the years. And what we find in those corrective action plans is everyone on a team needs to be trained annually, preferably together. It doesn't say that, but that's what I would prefer because we find that it actually works better. It's implemented better, people adopt those standards, they understand the material a lot better. And then new hires need to be trained before they're granted access to systems containing protected health information, i.e., the computers. And really, the meaning of that is so that those new team members come into your office with understanding how you do things in your office, that they don't bring their bad habits from their last employer into your practice and cause a problem. And I'm
I like,
assuming it's the same way with OSHA and infection control, right?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I like to capitalize on legacy errors. That's what we like to call them. So I want to emphasize about training new hires because there is a law. OSHA does say that the new hires have to be trained not only on your bloodborne pathogen standard, your hazard communication, your emergency action plan, but they've also got to be trained on your policy that you made for your office for infection control. Not every office is set up the same, right, Amy? I mean, offices have different policies, different protocols. So when you mentioned about team training, that is ideal. We can go to CE classes all day long and we can learn what we're supposed to do, but also training as a staff, as a complete team, really is important to understand how your policies are written, designed to keep your staff members safe. So training, like Amy mentioned, should be done upon hire for certain OSHA standards, even CDC recommendations, and then annually as well. And that is stated within OSHA's requirements. But also, don't forget whenever you get new practices. If you have a new piece of equipment, you need to train your staff on that. If you are ordering new supplies that you've never used before, a hazard communication standard, your staff members need to know how to properly handle those materials, how to store them, what PPE needs to be worn. It's really important that the entire staff is trained together because that's how things get done. That's where your questions get asked, and that's how you answer those questions with your team members.
I also find that really gives the entire team a chance to discuss things, what's working, what doesn't, and then especially when someone is teaching that class, it's an outside third party. It's someone that is unbiased, but also has all the right answers of what should be happening. And it just opens a dialogue with everyone, including the doctor, including owners. And it creates a better bonding experience so everyone has a say in what's actually happening in the office and where the roadblocks might be. That's what I usually see when I start working with someone. I know you've seen it too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's discuss about the front half staff versus the back half staff.
Clinical and
Because HIPAA
admin.
tends to float towards the front a lot more, and ocean infection control tends to float in the back staff. But it's really equally important that the entire staff knows a little bit about everything. I mean, those hygienists, those assistants, they've got to understand that they've got to log off their computer for HIPAA. Certain parameters have to be put in place on those computers in the back. And I'll touch on that with ocean infection control. That front half staff member, those people need to understand that certain areas need to be clean and maintained, how to approach patients and those people that bring in patients to the office if they're sick and what to do in those situations. So even though they may not be clinical personnel, they still need to know some things about these requirements.
Yeah. I know I can tell you I've been in offices, especially in cold and flu season, and I will not touch the counter in the front admin area. Um, Maybe a bit of germaphobe over here, but I I have one of those metal keys that opens doors, and I love the restrooms that have the foot pedal to help
Foot
open the
pull.
door. And
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with that, but I have people that are high risk in my home. My father lives with me and has a lung condition. So there are things that we can't bring and introduce to our homes in certain situations. So keeping the office area clean, especially in those communal areas where people are touching things constantly. Everybody comes up to the front and they put their hands down and then roam through their purse or their wallet to give you a credit card, and you're touching the credit card, and then you're touching the machine to type in numbers, and then you're going back to your keyboard and touching things, and then the credit card gets set on the counter again, and
Mhm.
that goes back into their wallet. And now that's touched how many surfaces, and all those cooties are everywhere.
Absolutely. Think about the patients that walk in and their crown has come off. They set it on the counter. Can this be put back in my mouth?
Ew.
Or the gentleman that brings in his mouth guard or maybe even his denture. Hey, I need this adjusted in this area right here. So think about the germs and the microbes that are floating around in their mouth, and they take out that apparatus and they set it on the front counter, or they try and hand it to the front desk person. There's a whole host of problems. But think about, I want to also touch on the fact that there's a lot of social media interaction going on in the clinic half side of things. And there are staff and personnel who are posting things on social media where it's including information that should not be included. Shouldn't that be included in team training, what you should and should not do, Amy?
I include it. I don't know what everyone else is doing, but I encourage everyone to do better. That's why we're discussing this. These are problems that we see all the time. We see team members that want to be social media influencers, and they're posting things. They've got the dental practices branded scrubs on,
Mhm.
and they have things in the background. I mean, I know others that do this that are really great at ensuring privacy and security. But there's a lot of others where, I remember one where when Instagram started to become really a major thing in our lives, and this dental assistant was taking a daily selfie in the lab every day. It wasn't around patients. She thought it was okay. And behind her was the daily schedule printed out with names and phone numbers and appointments and treatment, and sometimes even discounts were written on there.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was very visible in every selfie for over a
Hmm.
year.
Hmm.
So things like that happen. And, social media is one of those things. We could go down a rabbit hole on
Oh, we
this.
could. We could. We totally could.
We'll do
One of
another
my
episode specifically on social media.
Yeah, well, I'll save what I was going to say for social for that in other episode, but yes, just being wary of what you put out there. I mean, not only to protect yourself, but protect your patients and your staff members as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On to our second topic, employee errors. I'm going to let
Mm.
you go first because you have all kinds of things. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is needle sticks
Yeah.
and not sterilizing things. You tell me about all these different things and the ways that things get sterilized, and I hear you when you do your presentations, and all I think is ew, 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 ew. Now I want to check everything everywhere I go, even though this is not my specialty. But now
Right.
I'm hyper aware of what's going on, and if I'm not a person that does your specialty, but I'm a
Hmm.
patient.
Hmm.
So if I know enough to know that it shouldn't be done, are other patients looking at that too when they go to these dental practices?
That's a great point that you're making because we are putting so much information out there for patients to see and read and be aware of. We want to make sure that we're putting correct information out there. But there are errors that go on all the time. And 99.99% of the time, they are complete accidents. They weren't prepared for those errors to happen. And you've got to be aware of what you're doing when these errors occurred. When an occupational injury happens, and I'm not just going to say it's a needle stick injury, but those exposures can happen to your mucous membranes, a splash in your eyes, something in your nose, you weren't wearing a mask, something splashed into your mouth, maybe ultrasonic juice
Oh.
whenever you're cleaning those instruments because you weren't wearing your proper PPE. That is an exposure incident. That needs to be reported to management in the office, and there's a particular protocol that needs to be followed after that has been reported. But I think it kind of goes back to training and doing the right thing. If your staff's not trained, or if they just blatantly choose not to wear the PPE and this error occurred, then you've got to go back and retrain that staff. But a lot of mistakes do happen that are preventable. And fortunately, there are some barriers out there that help keep us safe as clinical employees. We have the hepatitis B vaccination. We have other immunizations that are available to us as clinicians. But once again, errors still happen, and transmissible diseases can be passed from the clinician to the patient, from the patient to the clinician, and even from patient to patient. And this has happened. There are documented instances where improper sterilization practices occurred, no biological spore testing was being done, no chemical indicators were being placed inside the autoclave or the cassettes to confirm that sterilization had been actually active. And so when these accidents happen, they have to be documented. So it all goes back to having a safe mental mindset whenever you're practicing because I get it. We work in a fast-paced environment and we do these things over and over and over again and we get bogged down after a while. Like we have to record this on my sterilization log and do my waterline testing. But employee errors happen. So when you're training, you want to try and abolish some of those legacy errors that you learned at old offices, that you learned at a CE course 10, 15, 20 years ago. There's new evidence-based practices out there. There's new guidelines that need to be followed. If you're not sure, ask. Ask,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
there's always some know-it-all in every office that wants to share their abundance of knowledge and information that they just learned.
Of course.
We love those know-it-alls.
Yes, geeks. We call them geeks. We're nerds.
Yes, yes. Well, speaking of geeks and nerds, this is on my end with employee errors. It's usually either a privacy violation or a security violation. And the privacy ones can actually be more damaging than even the security ones. The security ones can be overall catastrophic,
Mm.
but the privacy ones tend to be very overwhelming for a practice because privacy's been around for 29 years. That's been in law for a long
Long
time.
already?
Yeah, 1996. HIPAA
Wow.
fully enacted by, I mean, the privacy rule was even before then, but
Mhm.
it's it's kind of crazy. It's been around several decades, but you also have to remember there's a whole new generation of people that are in the workforce, and they didn't grow up with privacy. They grew up with parents that were on MySpace and then Facebook and then Instagram and now TikTok. And please don't do TikTok. Uh,
Mm-mm.
and they just don't understand privacy. So it becomes a requirement of the practice and the rest of the team to help train this younger generation so that they're understanding when they're inside a healthcare practice that
Mhm.
they're adhering to the same policies and procedures and
Yeah.
not sharing things that they shouldn't, or being aware of their voices when they're out at Costco and shopping, and or they run into someone, or they're out to lunch with some of the team. They start complaining about a patient. Well, the patient's mother's sitting right behind them in the next booth. I mean, things like that will come up. And I have to say, when it comes to HIPAA, we have this beautiful little law in there that says if you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing and an accident happens, it's just that, an accident. It's not negligence.
Huh.
And it's a beautiful law because before that, prior to 2020, yeah, there's a lot going on in 2020.
There's a lot going
But
on that
right, that's not today's episode. We're not
No,
commenting on that.
no.
But prior to that, we found that um, every office was exactly the same in the eyes of the law and enforcement. So you could have two practices that were very different
Mm.
in their compliance status, whether they were doing something or not, or they were doing online training, or they hired someone to do it all for them appropriately. They were like really involved in it and super excited to show up for HIPAA class.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often, but occasionally I get someone really nerdy that's like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I can think of one doctor off the top of my head
Oh my
every
gosh,
time.
nerd.
Every time. Yep. Every time in Petaluma, California.
Oh my goodness.
She's like, yeah, I'm excited for this. Let's learn something new. And the rest of her team's rolling their eyes like, well,
Oh,
at
of
least
course.
Amy's funny. And um, it didn't seem fair to me that offices that were working a program were treated the same as offices that weren't. So
Mm,
having this law that says it's an accident, not negligence, is huge. It's an enormous bonus for people to be able to say, "Hey, I was trying. I can document that I was trying,
mm,
and I have all this paperwork that says it was an accident. Here's how we handled it. We corrected the problem." And so the investigators will look at something like that and say, okay, fantastic. We're going to move on to another office that actually needs our help.
yeah.
But it has to be just that. It has to be an accident. It can't be you just had a team member that had rampant noncompliance,
Mm,
because then you could get in trouble that you knew this was an ongoing problem and you kept that person anyway.
right. Right.
Good
Man,
times.
man, good times.
We are actually fun people. We end up with dark topics.
We do, unfortunately, because these things happen. That's why we have to talk about these.
Yeah.
It's important to talk about training. It's important to talk about errors because they do happen. And it's okay. We learn from our mistakes, just like anything else. If you're fortunate enough where you've never had an occupational injury, occupational exposure, you've never had your privacy stolen, well, good on you. That's great. But there are plenty others that don't ever want that to happen and, are not looking forward to having that happen. And so, we're here to help prevent that and help teach other people about those errors that have happened and how to prevent that.
Yeah. In common sense ways.
Yeah, yes, in common sense
Yeah.
ways, for sure.
Because sometimes, I mean, I don't know about with OSHA and infection control. I assume there's parts of the law that maybe aren't applicable to dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
OSHA is very broad. It's for workplace safety.
Right.
And so some things are applicable to dental. It's kind of the same way with HIPAA. The law is
Hmm.
vague enough that it could apply to a multi-state hospital, to a surgery center, to a chiropractor, to dentistry.
Right.
And we both know that we all know, everybody listening knows that dentistry is this weird little niche in healthcare where there's nothing else like it. It's
Mm-mm.
image acquisition heavy. The software is persnickety. The integrations are funky sometimes. And it's just this beautiful little space that we love to call home.
Yep. I agree. I agree. We tend to think that dentistry falls under healthcare, and we are healthcare providers, but we aren't regulated by the Joint Commission like hospitals are when it comes to infection control practices and such. So, and there's certain forms that we don't even have to submit, like the healthcare industry does if there was an occupational injury. So, same thing. Dental's very niche, and doesn't mean that we're not supposed to follow the rules because we are.
Yes. Well, let's wrap this up with some jokes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know they're corny, but I really, really like them. So let's start with mine. Deanna, why did the new hire ace compliance?
Why did the new hire ace compliance? Because they were trained properly.
I wish. No, because they didn't want to get drilled later.
Oh my gosh, drilled. But bum.
Yeah, we need that audio in there.
I know, right? We should have audio. Okay. Why did the employee error go to rehab?
Uh-oh. Why?
Because it needed a serious correction. Kind of lame. Kind of lame.
I like the lame ones.
Oh my goodness.
Well, stay tuned for the next episode. We're always doing interesting and new things. Thanks for tuning in to PHI and PPE with Amy and Deanna. If you like this episode, share it with your dental team and drop us a review. And if you've got questions, reach out to us. We are
Mhm.
always here to help, and we want to keep your practice safe and compliant.
For
Until then, we'll
sure.
see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. For more information, please go to www.copperpennyconsulting.com. Bye.